You know, that time at McAllister that I was okay with getting stripped down that day because I wasn't going to be just a number. That was my right hook. I was building this fighting catalog, but for my spirit.
Yeah.
You know, instead of just
full
the
armor of
physical.
God, right?
That's the armor, man.
Full armor
That's
of God.
the armor.
So, you know, so what would you say, you touched on it a little bit, what do you, as you really progressed, when did you really go from get me out of here to change me? And then what spiritual disciplines did you really use that impacted that process?
Sure. Okay. It was probably maybe 3 years in-ish.
Okay.
Somewhere at that time, I want to say, I had met a guy, Jason. I'd met a guy named Jason, and Jason was one of, if not the biggest spiritual influence in my life. A total stranger. Like, he had studied so much, and I saw how disciplined he was in this environment. I saw how he navigated conversations, how he navigated struggles or hurdles that would come up in there. And I was like, I need to learn that, because he was balanced. He was balanced, man. It was like he was never too high, he was never too low. He just had this balance about him. So I had started studying with Jason, and I had started going to church. I went to church at McAllister. You know, I was slowly building up to this point, but it was like that few year mark in where it was like, this is way more important than my mind or my body, because I was working on building all three of them.
Yeah.
And then I noticed that, like, my mental studying, reading books, nonfiction, informational stuff, that would get at the top. Or I would get so physically focused that would get at the top. And after going to a church for a while, I had known enough about the word that people started asking me.
Okay.
They're like, hey, explain this to me.
Okay.
And once again, this is the coolest part, is that it wasn't because of me that I really made that full, like, big change where I'm following now.
Yeah.
It was because of other people.
So you started learning about shepherding first.
That's right.
Somebody shepherded you.
That's right.
And then you started to learn about discipleship.
That's it.
And then you started to learn about being bold.
Yep.
And then that armor that we talked about a little bit ago, I think you learned that, man, if I'm gonna live in that, and that's how people are gonna see me and know me, then I got to maintain that armor.
That's it.
I've got to maintain it by how I respond instead of react.
That's it.
Which was the young version of you, right?
That's it.
I got to maintain that armor when that enemy is attacking me. I got to know, okay, well, is it the breastplate of righteousness he's hit me in? Is it the helmet of salvation?
Yeah.
Is it the belt of truth? Where am I getting attacked? But then I think the other thing that you said earlier on is I started to put these guys around me, right? They were also
That's
spiritual warriors.
That's
and so
it.
your army was there. And now when you've come out, you have all of us
I've got
that are that way, right?
I've got battalion after battalion now.
So, it's pretty amazing. John 8:36 says, so if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed.
Amen.
Right? So even though it took 9.5 years to get physical freedom, it sounds like you started to experience that spiritual freedom about year 3 or so. Okay. And then James 1, says the testing of your faith produces steadfastness, right?
Amen.
So that was that early stages.
Yes,
and then I'm sure it was tested after that.